nobody black or anybody I knew were able to get into Studio 54. They would just block off the whole block, so that was just like, you know, so it was a severe hatred for Studio 54. It was like, you know, fuck them, man, really. I hope it burns down.
For millions of New Yorkers not fortunate enough to belong to the city's elite, the glamour of Studio 54 and the bohemian atmosphere of CBGB were a far cry from the reality of the streets.
New York City in the middle of the 70s was a rough looking place. You talked about there was corruption inside government, there was a problem with fiscal spending, and there was always a distrust of the mayorship around that time. So you had services in New York City that were limited, and the first areas that felt that the limited services were the areas where black and Hispanic people were living. Thus, you know, Uptown, Brooklyn, and the Bronx were having a rough time at it and kind of like dipped into the realm of being slums.
Well, I mean, this is a long history. It goes back to when they built the Cross Bronx Expressway. Robert Moses, who was a giant builder, had this mandate that even superseded that of the elected officials to build what he felt was necessary. And it was a big construction project that went through the Bronx. And it really split the area apart. It went right through the heart of the South Bronx. It disrupted the neighborhoods on either side. And the area never quite recovered from it psychologically. The sense of cohesion was lost.
The South Bronx resembled a war zone. Buildings that hadn't been demolished were torched by insurance scamming landlords desperate to get out, and a citywide blackout in '77 served only to enhance the atmosphere of lawlessness.
Come on, baby!
77, you see a lot of the stores, like right here up and down the line, a lot of these stores never came back on that blackout. People came through and they started looting, breaking the windows, you know what I'm saying, crashing bottles and just taking everything at sight. That's what it was in 77. That blackout was crazy. I think the South Bronx suffered more from that blackout than any other four boroughs. I think the South Bronx suffered more from that blackout than any other four boroughs.
We've been needlessly subjected to a night of terror in many communities that have been wantonly looted and burned.
I don't think anything was special. It was home. It was home. I mean, people had their own negative version of what they thought the Bronx was. The Bronx was burning. The Bronx was going to this. The Bronx had economic, social problems and this and that. That was home for me.
There was really nothing to do here. We only had like one movie theater, which was over there, which is deteriorated. We had one movie theater that came apart. We didn't have a lot of opportunities to come out about us in the South Bronx. That's what it was.
Unable to go to Studio 54 and lacking any local club scene, young people took matters into their own hands.
It started with the de-emphasizing of music education in the school systems. And since so many things were taken away from the community sort of like culturally compensated for that with the creation of making something out of things that just happen to be around. Old turntables, old record collections, hooking systems up into street poles for wiring, making art out of a wall and a spray can that happened to be left to the side, being able to dance on some cardboard.
Open-air disco parties sprung up on the streets and in the parks of the South Bronx, and the DJs who hosted them became neighborhood stars. One of the first to get a reputation for doing something different was DJ Kool Herc.
I was a guy that never went downtown. I stayed in the neighborhood and formed a culture called hip-hop. I was the guy that didn't follow with the rest of the people.
Well, basically, Kool Herc was the guy who got 2 turntables and a system, came out in a big park, and he rocked the park, you know what I'm saying?
It wasn't called hip hop when I was doing it. It was called a jam. Coming to the jam.
But the thing about Kool Herc, he played a lot of stuff. Like, he was a DJ who played records that you never hear on the radio. That's what he was. You know what I'm saying? A lot of break beats, a lot of hot break beats and all that.
Breakbeat was a term used for old funk records where the music broke down to a bare rhythm. Herc would take instrumental breaks from different records and mix them together non-stop. Other DJs soon picked up on the technique.
I figured out, like, to every great song, there's a great part. And a lot of times, you know, that part could have been 10 seconds. That really used to piss me off. Like, you know, best part of the record is where the drummer finally gets a moment and the rest of the band members is just taking a coffee break. So why can't this be 5 minutes? So I had to figure out a way to take this particular passage of the record, repeat that, but also add percussive noises and repeat it and sort of like do some manual editing to it. Kind of like do things to the record that the record just kind of like just should have had.
Class scientist goes to high school and wants to build technical things and makes a mixer and stuff like that. And once again, it was one of those understatements of inner city black children, Hispanic children that is saying, you know, we got our geniuses and people want to have the quest to become smarter and have opportunities to do great things. And the city was basically saying, no, nigga, you're not going to be anything more than just a, you know, a little slum creature. And the minds and the spirits and the souls came up through hip hop, said, no, we want to be bigger and better than that.
Hip hop was that thing that everybody at these particular kind of parties that got on the mic at some point would say, to the hip, the hop, the hippie, dippy, 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 hip, hip, hop, you don't stop. And that's how you would define one of those parties as opposed to one of the disco parties.
These parties were an outlet for a lot of aggressive energy that was bottled up otherwise. It's a place where guys who were criminals, who wanted to prey on people who looked like them, could go. What better place to rob someone than a room full of guys wearing the same snorkel and the same baseball cap?
The violence came from members of organized gangs whose territorial wars were a major problem in the Bronx.
1975, 76, 77, this park right here was most famous for gang activity. This is the park where if you got into a situation with the gangs, they probably bring you here to set you off right here because it's real big, it's like Central Park. So if they was gonna murder you or beat you up or anything or take your stuff, they would bring you in here because it take a long time for the cops to find you in St. Mary's Park. You know what I'm saying? So most of the gangs like the Bachelors, the Backspades, the Savage Nomads, they used to have their little gang fights right here in this park right here.